One of the things that's the hardest in this world is relying on people, putting our trust in people because they have proven unreliable. And so we have said to ourselves, I'm sure, that I'm not going to trust anyone ever again because they have proved faulty to me. And and so since we say that to ourselves, if anyone says I'm going to help you or something like that, we have learned that they don't prove true. So we don't bother with it anymore. And so on the flip side, we're taught in this world that we can't rely on anyone. We have to take responsibility for our actions and our needs and stuff like that. And so we have that in our mind that if anyone out of mercy tries to help us, we'll deny it. Why? I think a, a small portion of our mind, we think, well, who's going to criticize me for being in need anyways, when we're facing a hardship. So the title of this video is called Trust in the Lord, and I have taken it from Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And this verse in itself, or verses, has really helped me in my walk. It really shows just the Lord's position for each of us. And I have taken it in my faith walk. And it has helped me to rely on God and not in myself. And so, one of the things that we have learned in this world is having control over our circumstances, over our situations, and, you know, taking responsibility, planning, having goals. And I'll try to elaborate on each of these as I go. So, as I had already mentioned, that we're taught to be self-reliant. We're taught to think logically. We have to learn the way this world functions. We have to learn that there are some people out there that are not merciful. It's like that movie Ray, where his mom was teaching Ray when he became blind, or when he was, slowly becoming blind. He could still see, some things, but they were blurry. But eventually he lost his eyesight. So his mother was preparing him. She says, I will help you the first time, and then I'll help you the second time, but after that, you're on your own, because that is the way the world functions. And she was right. You know, there is a lack of mercy with a lot of people, that if you're in need and you need help, they're going to criticize you for being in need. So you're taught that you have to be smart with not only your finances, but in your goals and in your planning. And so we're taught that we must have control over the entire situation of our lives. And so any help from outside sources would be frowned upon. Um, let's see. And I already mentioned that, since help from outside sources would be frowned upon because you're not taking responsibility for what you have and what you own. And I mean, it seems like it's black and white. There are no gray areas. What if somebody faces a hardship? What if somebody loses their job, which is not their fault at all? You know, economy issues. When the the coronavirus happened in 2020, that a lot of people have lost their businesses. So that's something that was not able to be foreseen. And so planning was out the door, having goals was out the door, saving and investing was out the door because of everything that went on. And so, in that situation, that can't be helped. I mean, you lose your job, there's nothing that you can do. So you need to be helped. But somebody in that situation, if somebody wants to offer them mercy, they're going to deny it most likely because they don't want to be criticized. I mean, how many criticisms did we receive in the past for, receiving help? And so this is the all under control, our control over the situation. We don't want to be in that place to where we're going to be in need. So we want to plan ahead. We want to be able to invest and save so that when the negative does come, that we're going to be prepared for it. So having fear of being without would cause us to plan, for the future and things like that. Now, although planning can keep us safe and comfortable, it can also keep you in that place of being self-reliant. We want to be safe. We want to be comfortable. We don't want any pressure. We don't want to have to deal with being in need. We want everything to be nice and taken care of. And we don't want any unforeseeable mishaps that's going to, put us over edge. And so this is all in the realm of being self-reliant, thinking logically, doing what we have to in our own skins. And so since we're in that place to where we're taking control over our situation, we're not looking to outside sources now. So we get into scripture, and we'll see some scriptures that say, trusting God and stuff like that. And is that a hard concept to think about? Trusting. Well, how can we trust? We're taught in this world not to trust in anyone but ourselves. But when we come to Jesus, that is focused upon. And trusting him is a big thing. So then we're moved into that place eventually to where we need to trust God. And so we're then into that place of relinquishing our control to God. And I recall in my faith walk when it started, it was the hardest thing. Because God told me, when I was out there putting job applications through for graphic design positions, I heard nothing. And he said to me, wait upon me. He said, I want you to rest from what you are so naturally inclined to, and that's trusting yourself, trusting in your own strength to get by. And so he was putting his finger on that very area. And he said, I want you to trust. And that was the biggest thing that was hard for me, because I've heard many different things in my life. You can't trust anybody. You need to trust in yourself. You need to take care of the things. You can't have any help. And if you get help, you're going to be criticized. So I started to trust God. There were things that I needed, like food-wise, the basic essentials. I didn't have money. Of course, I wasn't working at the time. And so he said, trust me. And so slowly he started providing for the very things that I needed. And so with each provision, it was the small provisions, needing gas, needing bread and milk. There was one time where I was doing this ministry in my rest, and I was in need. And so I was helping a brother, move some things. And, I was telling him about my faith walk and what I was trusting God for. And I didn't say nothing to him. I was just sharing. And so he said to me, God told me to give you this. So with each of the things that I needed, God had taken care of. So at first, when my faith walk started, I had this pressure on me of, possible deadlines, when bills were due and stuff like that. I had no way to pay it. So I would stress about it because, that stress showed that, I no longer had control over the situation. So I was fearing the worst. And that is what we do when we face an obstacle in our lives. We think of the worst possible outcome that could happen. And so I had this pressure on me, but the more that God had started to come through, the pressure started to ease because I knew that he saw the situation. I knew that he cared about me. And so I was starting to trust him. And then, the each of the things that I had learned in this world, planning, having goals, uh, not trusting outside sources, all these things he was putting his finger on and say, now I'm going to work on this area. And so with each of the things that I had been re-educated with God on, he was showing me just how wrong the world's position was. So the more I learned from Jesus, the more I disowned the way the world functioned. And I learned how wrong it was. So, all those small areas of trust prepared me for the big ones. And, I would journal down his words. I would try to follow what he said wholeheartedly. And, all the while dealing with my own fears, learning to push fear away and learning to walk in faith. So the biggest was an apartment. He had told me to start packing. We didn't have the place yet, but I was walking in faith for it. Well, I already said in other videos, of how God had provided for that. And you can also check those videos out, and you can see how God had come through. But it was the hardest thing, dealing with the whole control issue, dealing with fear. Each of them, God was teaching me he just said, rely on me. I will take care of you, which he did. He had come through miraculously. And so when that happened, I was at that place then that was like, okay, God had already come through for me on each of these, on all the things of the past, so I can trust him now. And he was teaching me about, that game of trust that we play in school, where you're asked to fall back in somebody's arms. And the hardest thing with that game is you don't know if that person who's supposed to catch you is going to be vindictive and let you fall. Well, I mean, they can't do that because you're in a class, and if you do that, you're going to get in trouble. So, you're accountable then. So when we fall back, they catch us. And that's the same thing that we can do with God. He teaches us that we can rely on him, that we don't need to worry, that we don't need to fear, that he's not like man, where he's going to leave us hanging. I'm not saying all men are like that, but there are some people that are, vindictive and stuff like that, and will hurt you and let you fall. But there's a good many people out there that do operate in mercy, and they won't treat you like that. And then there was another issue where, I wanted to go to a Bible study at the church, and I had enough gas to get there. And I was saying, Lord, I need to trust you. And I remember what he said: if you believe, you'll receive whatever you ask for in prayer. And another place, it says, if you believe and not doubt, then, you could say to this mountain, go throw yourself in the sea, and it will be done for you. So I was holding on to those scriptures. And I said to myself that I can't walk in fear. I can't think of the worst. I can't say that I'm not going to go to the church and not believe that God's going to take care of me. So that's exactly what I did. I fell in his arms with trust, and I relied on him. So I said, Lord, you know my needs. You know that I need gas, and I need, bread and milk for this time again. And so I went by faith to the church, which was like 20 miles away. So I got there. And of course, you still have that fear inside you. Oh man, I'm going to be stranded on the road. But then you have to push that fear away. So I got into the church and I sat next to a brother. And he eventually said, God told me to give you this. And so he gave me enough for gas and milk. And I was like, wow, this is so amazing. So I wrote that down with the other testimonies of how God had come through. And so, another big thing was, my car. I went to visit somebody that was getting surgery. I had enough gas to get there, but on the way back, um, there was something wrong with the fuel that needed to be replaced. I thought it was a gas issue, but it wasn't. So, uh, I got to the exit and all of a sudden the car stopped. So I had to move it to the side of the road. And God worked the whole thing out. I mean, but through that entire thing, I was dealing with fear. And, I was wondering, I couldn't pay for the car to get fixed because I didn't have funds. And so the mechanic who I was told was reliable graciously let the car stay on their lot until I can come up with the funds. And then the enemy was working through fear. He was saying, they're going to charge you a lot fee. You're not going to be able to pay for it. And God said, don't let fear make your decisions. He said, don't let the desperation of a circumstance make your decisions. And so I had to push away fear with faith, remembering everything that God had done for me. And so I started relying on him in that, trusting what he had said, remembering all the times they had come through, remembering the scriptures that spoke about God's provision. I used that as a battle against the enemy. And so, to make a long story short, God provided for the car to get fixed. And you can, hear about this testimony in the other videos that I had made. And it would really encourage you, when you're walking in this, this place to where you're relinquishing your control over the situation and not relying in yourself. So, like I had already said, is that when we trust God, he starts showing us that the areas that we previously had control in, that we need to give up. And he'll tell us that, when people say that you can't rely on anyone, then he tells us that we can, because God will use them. And so it's kind of funny that, what I had learned is that whatever this world tells you to do, God wants you to do opposite of it. So, God teaches us when we start relying on him and when we let him have the driver's seat, that we need to put planning out the door, because God is the one that will direct us. He directs our path. Now, how many people that have planned things in this world who had control over their situation, how many times have those things went off the path that they were planning? They may have had money in the bank and it was taken, or maybe they planned for something and it didn't work out the way they thought. Well, there goes the planning out the door. We don't know what could happen. That is why we need to rely fully on God. And so previously, when we have control over the situation, we're told not to trust outside sources. Well, when we're trusting God, God uses different people to bless us. So if we're in a need for something, God's going to touch somebody's heart and say, I want you to help them. But the thing that needs to be worked on is learning to receive, putting away what we have learned when people told us you can't trust anybody or you can't receive help with this because that will make you irresponsible. We need to put that up, putting it away, and learning to let God bless us. And by us receiving, it's God's way of saying, I am going to take care of you, that you can trust me, that I am your source. And one last thing is, you know, where we're previously learned to fear because we don't have control over the situation, we put that fear up and learn to trust Jesus, knowing that he's going to come through for us. And with God, there is no fear of the situation because he teaches us that we can trust him, that when he proves reliable, then we don't need to fear anymore, that we just walk in faith. So I pray this video has blessed you. Thank you for taking the time to watch.